Happy Friday, everyone. Thanks for joining us today on this edition of Business Daily. I'm Lee Ji-yoon in Seoul. Before we get started, let's first get a quick check of the day's highlights. Korea's struggling shipbuilders have recently won a number of big orders, raising hopes that they may be on the road to recovery. Although the global economy is off to a better start this year, leaders at the World Economic Forum warn of a rise in nationalism and less cooperation among world powers. These stories and more coming right up. A string of big orders for Korea's shipbuilders is raising hopes that the ailing sector could be back on the recovery track, driven by rising oil prices. While the so-called Big Three are expected to regain some much-needed momentum this year, there are still some dark clouds on the horizon. Our Kim Min-ji starts us off.
There may be light at the end of the tunnel for Korea's ailing shipbuilding industry. Samsung Heavy Industries announced this week that it won a deal to build a floating storage and regasification unit, or FSRU, which is used in transiting and transferring liquefied natural gas. The order is estimated to be worth some $230 million. Samsung Heavy also won an almost $1.3 billion deal to build an offshore facility early this month. Hyundai Heavy Industries said it won an order to build an FSRU ship, as well as receiving orders from Iran to build 10 ships last month worth $700 million. Daewoo Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering also won a contract for a floating storage and regasification unit ship last month. It's also stepping up negotiations to deliver 2 drill ships ordered by Angola, which had been delayed. That's good news for Korea's shipbuilding industry, which has been suffering from massive losses amid an industry-wide slump and increased costs. Although it will take time for a complete rebound, there are hopes that new orders will be the start of putting the nation's shipyards back on recovery track. This as the industry is expected to pick up steam on the back of rising global oil prices. Crude prices, which hovered around the $40 a barrel mark last year, have recently risen to the $50 range. However, a downside factor is that the cost of building ships continues to rise. Experts say there are also uncertainties regarding to what extent oil prices will recover, while slow growth in the global economy could also weigh on the industry. Kim Min-ji, Business Daily.
The Korean government is setting up a team to counter measures from China seen as retaliatory in nature against local exporters. The response includes setting up subcommittees for areas like battery production, known to be a target of China's trade restrictions. The groups will monitor developments by sector and work with businesses that are being affected. Korea has seen more limitations from Beijing on its products, such as bidet, cosmetics, and air purifiers, for alleged problems with quality. The rise in trade problems has become noticeable following Seoul's decision to deploy the U.S. THAAD battery, which Beijing has said it is against. China's economy expanded 6.7% last year, according to the country's Statistics Bureau. Although that's well within the Chinese government's target of 6.5% to 7%, it's still the slowest pace of growth in 26 years. The Chinese economy has continued to slow on the back of global demand after logging 6.9% growth in 2015. With increasing uncertainties, including the instability in its housing market and its bid to implement structural reforms, China is expected to lower its growth target for this year to around 6.5%. Meeting for the first time this year, the European Central Bank has held its interest rates steady and said it will maintain its bond buying program. Thursday's decision comes as the ECB pushes to keep its unprecedented stimulus program in place to help prop up the bloc's slow recovery. ECB President Mario Draghi said that although the 19-bloc Eurozone is showing steady signs of growth, it's not the right time for the central bank to relax. He said there's no convincing sign yet of a rise in inflation towards the bank's goal of just under 2%, and added that stimulus will be expanded if needed. And moving on to markets, to give us a wrap-up of this week's stock market action, we have our Business Daily's markets contributor, Choi Jin-seok, joining us on the phone today. Hello, Jin-seok.
Thanks for having me, June.
So as we close the week, how are things looking on the last day of trading?
Both the Kospi and the Kosdaq market finished the week with a gloomy picture. The Kospi fell by 0.3% to close at 2065, while the Kosdaq sank by 0.6% to close at 622. Uncertainty just ahead of the inauguration of Donald Trump as U.S. president has been elevated, and this spooked investors overall in today's market. Trading volumes were mostly muted as well. The U.S. stock market that closed weak overnight also negatively affected market sentiment. By sector, food and beverage, pharmaceuticals, and distribution companies performed relatively strongly, while the share prices of steel, technology, and securities firms plummeted by a large margin.
Then how's the overall weekly performance? Trading has been sluggish all week long.
Exactly. On a weekly basis, the Kospi market fell slightly, while the Kosdaq dropped by more than 1%. All types of stocks ranging from large caps, mid caps, and small caps fell as well. Despite stock buying by both institutions and retail investors, foreign investors who sold shares dragged down the Kospi market. The arrest warrant, a request for Samsung Hair apparent Lee Jae-yong, which was later turned down, negatively affected sentiment in the entire market as well. By sector, steel, media, and banking were good, while construction, utilities, and chemicals showed weak performance.
But it's not only in the Korean market. Overall sentiment in global markets has mostly been muted. So do experts think this trend will continue going forward?
Right. Most experts call for low volatility and consolidation in global equity markets as a whole. Most of all, uncertainty surrounding the next administration of the U.S. has affected sentiment. In this regard, details of Trump's economic policies will be important catalysts going forward. Historically, since 1952, the U.S. Dow Jones Index rose by 8.4% a year when Republicans secured the presidency, while the index surged by 14.2% annually when the Democratic Party secured the presidency. As most Asian countries will have Lunar New Year's holidays soon, trading volumes in Asian markets are expected to be sluggish as well. Investors are likely to use this time to adjust their investment strategy rather than making moves. This has been Trading Talk for Business Daily.
Rapid advances are being made in the field of artificial intelligence as the world prepares for the fourth industrial revolution and the changes it will bring to our everyday lives. They include our job market, which could see over half of the workforce being replaced by robots. Our Lee Ju-young has more.
The robots are coming. And in the next 8 years, the technological capability of artificial intelligence is believed to become strong enough to take over as much as 61% of human jobs. That's equivalent to about 16 million displaced workers in Korea. According to Korea Employment Information Service, these jobs mostly require low-skilled labor like cleaners and kitchen assistants who face a 100% replacement risk. Ticket agents, dairy farmers, and valets face just as high of a risk at over 90%. On the contrary, more specialized occupations like accountants, airplane pilots, and financial analysts had some of the lowest probabilities of being replaced by the rise of robots and AI. The state-run institute says as about 12.5% of Korea's workforce was already working in fields vulnerable to robots as of last year, workers in those fields should actively adapt to the fourth industrial revolution by developing specialized skills instead of trying to resist the coming change. It also adds that the report only looks at if the machines will be capable of replacing jobs, and whether that actually happens would largely depend on economic utility and social consensus. Lee Ju-young, Business Daily.
On this week's Global Business News, we head over to Davos, where the world's decision makers have been networking as Donald Trump is just hours away from becoming America's 45th president. We're joined by Eunice Kim for more. Hello, Eunice.
Hello.
So last year, the theme at the World Economic Forum was the fourth industrial revolution. But this year, I hear that they're grappling with a very different issue.
Right, and it is a very different world that the global elites are dealing with today, aren't we? 1 year later, Ji-yoon. Sure, from the U.S. Presidential elections and the Brexit vote, they were on the calendar, but most experts even did not call the reality that we are dealing with today. So the theme of this year's Davos Forum is responsive and responsible leadership, and that's a topic world leaders will likely have to work through throughout the coming year. Take a look.
With America set to inaugurate its first reality TV/billionaire tycoon president, Donald Trump, over on the Swiss Alps, the world's political and business who's who have been deliberating over how to legitimize globalization and free trade. The headline event at this year's World Economic Forum was a defense of globalization by none other than President Xi Jinping, China's first leader to attend the annual gathering of elites.
It is true that economic globalization has created new problems, but this is no justification to write off economic globalization altogether. Rather, we should adapt to and guide economic globalization, cushion its negative impact, and deliver its benefits to all countries and all nations.
The global economy looks to be on an upswing. The IMF earlier this week upgraded its growth outlook for a handful of countries for the first time in several years. But what's being termed populism, or a general distrust of the world's institutions, has become a real cause for concern for Davos attendees. Released earlier this week, this year's Edelman Trust Barometer showed that trust was down across the board on government, media, business, and NGOs in the 28 countries the marketing firm polled over October and November of last year. Edelman added that half of even the group of high-income, college-educated, and well-informed believed that the system was simply not working. This, as Oxfam put to perspective, the growing gap of inequality. Ahead of Davos, its report noted the world's 8 richest, including the likes of Microsoft's Bill Gates and the founder of retailer Zara's parent company, held as much wealth as the bottom 50% of the human race. These are shifts that global leaders are sitting up and taking note of. UK Prime Minister Theresa May, who announced her plans for a clean break from the EU on Tuesday, appeared before Davos participants and called on companies to do more to play fair.
But at the same time as promoting this openness, we must heed the underlying feeling that there are some companies, particularly those with a global reach, who are playing by a different set of rules to ordinary working people. So it is essential for business to demonstrate leadership, to show that in this globalized world, everyone is playing by the same rules.
So we do have several uncertainties this year, including several elections in European countries that could possibly alter the future of the European Union. But on that note, the UK has made clear of its intention to make a clean break from the European Union this week. So
Indeed.
How is that being received?
Well, I guess overall, as well as it can be, we did see European Council President Donald Tusk tweeting out that it was, quote, at least more realistic announcement on Brexit. On Tuesday, UK Prime Minister Theresa May laid out a thought-out 12-point plan of London's priorities heading into what she called a period of momentous change. Heralding a global Britain, her 12 points included leaving the single market, to be free to strike trade deals across the world, on which it was later added at Davos that informal trade talks with non-EU nations were underway. Markets rallied on a great deal of uncertainty being taken off the markets after staging a steep fall at the start of the week. The UK sterling strengthened against the dollar on Tuesday, posting its biggest gain since the 2008 financial crisis to $1.23.
And let's head over to the United States, where President-elect Donald Trump is set to be sworn in at around 2 a.m. Korea time. So what should we keep in mind as we head into it?
So we are expecting some 900,000 people estimated to attend his inauguration, which includes protesters. Several polls this week showed that Trump heads into his term with historically low approval numbers. About 40% of Americans back him, while outgoing President Barack Obama's poll numbers have risen to the 60% range. Also to watch, most of his cabinet nominees are still going through their confirmation process. It remains to be seen what is going to be at the very top of his agenda once he is in office. And during Senate hearings this week, we did hear from the Commerce pick Wilbur Ross, who's expected to play a large role in crafting America's trade policy, singling out China as the world's most protectionist country, while Treasury nominee Steven Mnuchin testified he would label China a currency manipulator if it was warranted.
Well, definitely a lot of changes coming to the global trade front with him being inaugurated. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Sure thing.
And that wraps it up for today and this week. Thanks so much for watching. We'll be back next week at the same time, same place for your Business Daily. Until then, goodbye.